He turned to the crowd and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "You shouldn't have come, Lily. You make me look small." The ballroom froze. Every conversation stopped. Every fork paused halfway to every mouth. Every eye in that room turned to look at me, standing there in a navy gown I'd saved months to buy, holding the invitation he said he'd lost. Behind him, his colleagues smirked like they were watching some pathetic comedy show. His boss glanced away, embarrassed for me, embarrassed to be associated with this public humiliation of a wife who dared to show up where she wasn't wanted. That was the night my husband told the world I was beneath him. But that night became the last time anyone would ever mistake me for small. Before we go on, like this video, subscribe to Elderly Stories, and comment where you're watching from, because what happens next will remind you why silence can be power's sharpest weapon. But let me take you back. Back to when I still believed in him. Back to when I thought love meant making yourself invisible so the other person could shine brighter. Back to 3 years earlier, when I was still stupid enough to think that sacrifice was the same thing as love. I was an engineer. Am an engineer. Don't let anyone tell you that past tense applies to who you are just because someone else decided to erase you from the story. I worked remotely for Hellstrom Technologies, building prototypes, writing code that would become the backbone of systems worth millions of dollars. I worked from our kitchen table while my son did his homework beside me, solving complex algorithms while stirring dinner, debugging code while folding laundry. My husband Noah would come home from the office, and I'd show him what I'd built that day. My code, my presentations, my strategy notes, my breakthrough solutions to problems that had been stumping his entire development team. And he'd look at my work with this expression of wonder and say, "You're so good at simplifying things for me." I thought that meant he admired me. I thought it meant he was proud to have a wife who could solve problems he couldn't even understand. It really meant he was rehearsing my words for someone else, memorizing my explanations so he could stand in boardrooms the next day and present my brilliance as his own inspiration. The humiliations started small. They always do, don't they? Like drops of poison in a well, you don't taste it at first, but slowly, inevitably, it kills everything clean and good in your life. I wasn't invited to company dinners because they were technical talk. As if I wasn't the one writing the technical solutions they'd be discussing. As if my computer science degree from MIT was just some cute hobby I'd picked up between cooking and cleaning. He'd come home from these dinners with stories about the brilliant insights he'd shared, the standing ovations he'd received, the promotions that were coming his way because of his innovative thinking. My innovative thinking. My solutions. My sleepless nights spent debugging code that he'd present as his morning inspiration. He'd downplay my degree as cute when people asked what I did. "Oh, Lily dabbles in programming. It's adorable how she thinks she understands technology." Dabbles. Like I was playing with finger paints instead of architecting systems that would generate millions in revenue. He forgot our anniversary, the same day every year for 12 years, but he remembered his assistant's birthday. Sienna's birthday. He'd spend lunch breaks shopping for her gifts, spend evenings wrapping them carefully, spend mornings making sure her coffee was exactly how she liked it. But our anniversary? Oh, was that this week? "I'm so busy with this project, honey." You understand. Yes, I understood. I understood that the project consuming all his time and attention was built on my work, presented under his name, credited to his genius. I understood that while I was invisible in his professional life, Sienna was very, very visible. My mother saw it before I did. Mothers always do, don't they? They can smell the rot in your marriage before you've even admitted there's a problem. A man who hides your light will eventually burn in its reflection, she warned me during one of our Sunday phone calls. I'd been telling her about another company dinner I wasn't invited to, another achievement of mine that Noah had claimed as his own. "He's not hiding my light, Mom," I'd protested. "He's building on it." That's what partners do, they support each other. "Support doesn't mean erasure, Lily," she'd said quietly. "And love doesn't mean making yourself small so someone else can feel big." But I didn't listen. I was too busy being grateful that someone as successful and confident as Noah had chosen me. Too busy believing that my role was to be the quiet genius behind the public success. Too busy thinking that love meant sacrifice instead of partnership. The only person who saw me clearly during those years was my son, Eli. 9 years old and already showing the kind of analytical mind that makes teachers call parents for conferences and peers call kids weird. He loved robotics with the pure passion that only children can have for their obsessions. While other kids played video games, Eli built robots. While other kids watched cartoons, Eli studied circuit diagrams. And his father? His father, who worked in technology and should have been the perfect mentor for a tech-obsessed kid? His father was always too busy, too important, too focused on the presentations he was preparing, my presentations, to pay attention to his son's genuine excitement about learning. Dad promised he'd come to my robotics competition, Eli would tell me, his face bright with hope. He said he'd help me debug the navigation code. And I'd watch that hope die slowly over the next few days as Noah found excuse after excuse. Work emergency. Important client meeting. Last-minute presentation. Always a presentation based on my work that he was too busy claiming credit for to remember his promises to his son. So I became both mother and mentor. I taught Eli coding at our kitchen table, the same table where I wrote the algorithms that built his father's career. I helped him debug his robot's navigation system while debugging the software that would win Noah another promotion. I attended every robotics competition, cheering louder than any other parent, taking videos that Noah was too busy to watch. And Eli learned. Not just coding, not just robotics, but something more important. He learned what it looked like when someone kept their promises. He learned what it felt like to have someone invest in his dreams instead of stealing them. He learned that love wasn't about taking credit, it was about giving support. The child was watching. Always watching. Learning what kind of man he wanted to become by watching what kind of man his father chose to be. Learning what kind of partner he wanted to find by watching how his father treated his mother. Learning whether promises meant something or nothing by counting how many times his father's word proved worthless. I should have left then. I should have taken Eli and walked away the first time Noah claimed my work as his own. I should have protected my son from learning that betrayal was normal, that theft was acceptable, that the people who love you are the ones most likely to steal your dreams and call it partnership. But I didn't leave. I stayed. I kept working, kept creating, kept feeding the machine that elevated my husband while erasing me. I stayed because I still believed that love meant sacrifice. I stayed because I thought that if I just worked harder, contributed more, made myself more valuable, eventually he'd see me. Really see me. Acknowledge me. Include me. I stayed because I was still too broken to realize that a man who could steal from his wife and lie to his son wasn't capable of the kind of love I was trying to earn. The discovery came like discoveries always do, by accident, when you're looking for something else entirely. I was trying to find our tax documents on Noah's laptop. He'd been doing our taxes for years, claiming it was too complicated for me to understand. As if the woman who designed complex algorithms couldn't figure out basic tax software. But I'd learned to pick my battles, and taxes felt like a small concession compared to the larger war I was losing. His email was open. I wasn't snooping, the browser window was just there, showing his inbox, and I saw a subject line that made my blood freeze, finalizing our merger. Our merger. Noah and who? We weren't merging with another company. Hellstrom was stable, successful, growing steadily on the foundation of innovations I'd built and he'd claimed. What merger? I clicked before I could stop myself. Before I could respect his privacy the way he'd never respected mine. Before I could maintain the trust he'd been violating for years. The email was from Sienna, his assistant. The woman whose birthday he remembered when he forgot our anniversary. The woman who was always visible in his professional life when I was systematically erased. Noah, attached is the final presentation deck for tomorrow's board meeting. I've incorporated all the algorithm improvements we discussed. Once this goes through, we can finalize our merger and I can officially become your partner in all aspects of the business and life. Love you. Partner in all aspects of the business and life. I opened the attachment with hands that were already shaking, already knowing what I'd find, but hoping I was wrong. Praying I was wrong. Desperate to be wrong. It was my presentation deck. My algorithms. My months of work on improving the core system architecture that ran Hallstrom's flagship product. But my name wasn't anywhere on it. Instead, it was titled Innovative Solutions by Noah Carter and Sienna Lowe. Sienna Lowe, the assistant who couldn't code Hello World if her life depended on it. Sienna Lowe, whose contribution to these algorithms was exactly nothing. Sienna Lowe, who was apparently about to become his partner in all aspects of the business and life. I scrolled through page after page of my work, my formulas, my late-night breakthroughs, all rebranded under their names. Equations I'd derived, code I'd written, solutions I'd spent weeks perfecting. All of it credited to a love affair that had been built on stealing my life's work. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was at the bottom of the email thread, in a message I almost missed. A casual mention that made my entire world collapse. I've updated the insurance policy to reflect our new partnership structure. Lily's coverage ends Friday. I've added you as my official partner and beneficiary. I wasn't just being erased from his work. I was being erased from his life. Completely. Systematically. While I sat at our kitchen table writing the code that funded his success, he was rewriting our marriage to exclude me entirely. I wasn't just erased. I was rewritten. Edited out of the story of my own life like an unnecessary character in someone else's screenplay. I sat there in our bedroom, staring at the evidence of his betrayal on his own laptop, and I felt something crack inside me. Not break, crack. Like the first fracture in a dam before the whole structure fails. The pain was so sharp and complete that I couldn't even cry. I just sat there, absorbing the magnitude of what he'd done, what they'd done, what they were planning to do. He was stealing my work and giving it to another woman. He was stealing my marriage and giving it to another woman. He was stealing my life and giving it to another woman while I sat in the next room helping our son with homework, making dinner, living the life of a wife who had no idea she'd already been divorced and replaced. But here's what Noah didn't understand about engineers. We don't just solve problems, we prevent them. We build safeguards. We create backup systems. We document everything because we know that the most devastating failures always come from the places you least expect them. Instead of confrontation, I chose calculation. Instead of screaming, I chose strategy. Instead of tears, I chose data collection. I created a folder on a private drive I'd set up years ago for my freelance work. A drive Noah didn't know existed, in a digital space he couldn't access or control. I named it Project Halo because I was about to expose the angel he pretended to be and reveal the devil underneath. Inside Project Halo, I stored everything. Screenshots of every email between Noah and Sienna. PDF metadata showing the creation timestamps on every document they'd claimed as joint work. Voice memos I'd made explaining my thought processes while developing each algorithm. Timestamped code commits from my personal repository that proved authorship of every innovation Noah had presented as his own. While he was building promotions on my stolen work, I was building proof of his theft. While he was planning his future with another woman using my innovations as his foundation, I was constructing the evidence that would destroy everything he'd built on lies. I documented 3 years of intellectual theft. 3 years of stolen credit. 3 years of my work being presented under his name while I was systematically excluded from the professional recognition I'd earned. 3 years of my husband building a career on my brilliance while treating me like an embarrassing secret he had to hide from his colleagues. The documentation was meticulous, comprehensive, and absolutely damning. Any forensic accountant could follow the trail from my original work to his presentations. Any intellectual property lawyer could prove theft. Any decent human being could see the pattern of systematic erasure and exploitation. But I wasn't ready to use it yet. I needed to understand the full scope of what they'd planned. I needed to know exactly how deep this betrayal went before I decided how to respond. I needed to see if there was any part of my husband left that was capable of honesty, of remorse, of redemption. There wasn't. The call came on a Tuesday morning while Noah was at work and Eli was at school. I was coding at the kitchen table, working on a new algorithm that I knew would become another of Noah's brilliant insights if I didn't protect it first. "Is this Rowan?" The voice was professional, curious, respectful in a way I hadn't heard in years when people talked about my work. Rowan was the name I'd started using for my open source contributions. Lily Rowan instead of Lily Carter, because I was tired of having my work associated with a man who stole credit instead of earning it. I'd begun building a separate professional identity, one that couldn't be claimed or co-opted by my husband's ambitions. "Yes, this is Rowan," I said carefully. "Ms. Rowan, this is David Kim from Axion Core. We're a tech startup focused on AI-driven automation, and we've been analyzing open-source contributions in our field. We've identified a pattern in your code signature, work that's consistently innovative, elegantly structured, and highly efficient." My heart started beating faster. Someone had noticed my work. Actually noticed it, analyzed it, recognized its value. Someone who wasn't planning to steal it and present it as their own inspiration. "The thing is," David continued, "we've seen similar solutions presented at industry conferences by Noah Carter from Halstrom Technologies. The signature patterns are identical, but the timing suggests your open source work predates his presentations by several months in every case." I closed my eyes, feeling the walls of my secret starting to crumble. Someone had noticed. Someone had done the analysis that proved what I'd been documenting in Project Halo. Someone had connected the dots between my work and Noah's theft. "We'd like to meet with you if you're interested," David said. "We think there might be an opportunity for collaboration. And if there's been any misattribution of credit, we'd like to help you set the record straight." I hesitated. Meeting with them would mean stepping out of the shadows I'd been hiding in for 3 years. It would mean acknowledging publicly that I was the real architect of the innovations Noah had built his career on. It would mean war. "I'd like that," I heard myself say. "When and where? Are you available Thursday afternoon? We have a conference room at the Marriott downtown. Conference room C, 2 p.m. I hung up the phone and stared at the algorithm I'd been working on, the one that would become Noah's next stolen triumph if I didn't act. But now I had options. Now I had allies. Now I had a choice between continuing to feed the machine that erased me or finally stepping into the light I'd been generating all along. Thursday couldn't come fast enough. The meeting with Axion Core changed everything. David Kim turned out to be the CTO of a company that was everything Halstrom pretended to be: innovative, ethical, committed to giving credit where credit was due. He'd brought their lead engineer, Sarah Chin, and their director of intellectual property, Marcus Webb. "We've been tracking your contributions for over a year," Sarah explained, pulling up side-by-side code comparisons on her laptop. "Your work is consistently 6 to 8 months ahead of what Carter presents at conferences. Either he's the most successful intellectual thief in the industry, or you're the most generous collaborator who never gets credit." Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious. "We've seen this pattern before. It's called ghost engineering. Someone does the real work while someone else takes public credit. It's more common than people think, especially when the real engineer is a woman working behind the scenes." Ghost engineering. There was a name for what had been happening to me. There were other women who'd experienced this systematic erasure, this theft of identity and credit and professional existence. I wasn't alone. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining the injustice I'd been living with for 3 years. "What we're proposing," David said, "is a position as our director of algorithmic systems. Full credit for your work, your name on every patent, your innovations properly attributed. Plus, we'd like your help in preparing a case study on intellectual property theft in the tech industry. A case study. They wanted to use my experience to help other women who were being erased by the men they trusted. They wanted to turn my pain into protection for others who might not be strong enough to fight back on their own. What would that involve? I asked, though I already knew the answer. It would involve exposing Noah, destroying his career, revealing to the entire industry that his reputation was built on stolen work. It would mean war, but war with allies, war with evidence, war with the backing of people who believed in justice instead of theft. Full documentation of the theft, Marcus explained. Timeline of original work versus presentations. Code analysis proving authorship. Financial analysis of how the stolen innovations benefited Hallstrom while you received no compensation or credit. We're not asking you to decide today, Sarah added. But we want you to know that if you choose to fight this, you won't be fighting alone. And if you choose to join us, you'll be building something new instead of just exposing something rotten. I thought about Eli, about what he was learning from watching his father lie and steal and betray. I thought about other women like me, sitting at kitchen tables, building innovations that would be credited to men who'd never had an original thought in their lives. I thought about the years I'd lost believing that love meant erasure, that marriage meant sacrifice, that being a good wife meant letting your husband steal your dreams and call them his own. I'd like to join you, I said quietly. All of it. The position, the case study, the fight. I'm ready. And I was. I was ready to stop being invisible. Ready to stop being a ghost in my own life. Ready to step into the light I'd been generating for years while other people claimed credit for its brilliance. That night, I started planning. Not just the exposure of Noah's theft, but the perfect moment to reveal it. The moment when his lies would be most visible, most public, most devastating to the reputation he'd built on my stolen work. The Corporate Innovation Awards banquet was 3 weeks away. Noah was receiving the Visionary Leadership Award for his groundbreaking contributions to algorithmic design. He'd been preparing his acceptance speech for weeks, practicing in front of the bathroom mirror, rehearsing the humble gratitude he'd express for an honor he'd earned by stealing my life's work. The banquet would be held at the Chamberlain Pavilion, with 300 of the industry's most prominent figures in attendance. Executives, investors, journalists, competitors, everyone who mattered in our field would be there to witness Noah's moment of triumph, which would become his moment of exposure. I didn't need an invitation. I'd helped plan the guest list, suggested the menu, even proofread the program. My name wasn't anywhere on the planning committee, of course. Noah had claimed credit for my contributions there too. But I knew every detail of the event, including the fact that the presentation screens were connected to a network I'd helped design. The same network I could access remotely. I spent the 3 weeks before the banquet preparing my presentation. Not for Axion Core this time, but for Noah. A comprehensive breakdown of every algorithm he'd stolen, every innovation he'd claimed, every presentation he'd built on my work. Side-by-side code comparisons. Timeline analyses. Financial calculations showing how much money Hallstrom had made from my stolen innovations. The truth, documented and proven and undeniable. I also spent those 3 weeks shopping for the perfect dress. Navy blue, elegant but not flashy, professional but not apologetic. The kind of dress that commands respect without demanding attention. The kind of dress that says, I belong here instead of, please don't notice me. The dress I wore the night Noah told a room full of his colleagues that I made him look small. I arrived at the Chamberlain Pavilion an hour after the cocktail reception had begun. Late enough that Noah would be relaxed, confident, surrounded by colleagues congratulating him on his upcoming award. Early enough that I could position myself strategically before the dinner service began. The ballroom was exactly as I'd imagined it when we'd planned the event together, though of course, only Noah's name appeared on the planning committee roster. Crystal chandeliers, round tables with white linens, a stage with presentation screens that I'd helped design and could control remotely. I saw him immediately. Noah, in his best tuxedo, holding court at a table near the front. Sienna beside him, wearing a red dress that was just a little too tight, a little too bright, a little too desperate for attention. They were laughing with his colleagues, basking in the anticipation of his moment of triumph. Our son wasn't there. Eli was at my mother's house, safely away from the destruction I was about to unleash. He'd ask questions later, want to understand why Daddy was in the news, why Mommy looked so sad but also so strong. I'd find ways to explain it that protected his innocence while teaching him about justice. I took a table in the back, alone, exactly where Noah would expect me to sit if I'd been invited. Invisible. Insignificant. Easy to overlook until the moment I chose to be seen. The dinner passed slowly. Speeches from industry leaders, presentations of lesser awards, the gradual building of anticipation toward the main event. The Visionary Leadership Award, presented to Noah Carter for his innovative contributions to algorithmic design that have revolutionized automated systems. My contributions. My algorithms. My sleepless nights and breakthrough moments and years of unpaid, uncredited work. All about to be celebrated as his vision, his leadership, his brilliance. When they called his name, the applause was thunderous. Noah walked to the stage with the confident stride of a man who'd never doubted he deserved every accolade he'd received. He shook hands with the presenter, accepted the Crystal Award, stepped up to the microphone with the smile of someone who'd gotten away with the perfect crime. "Thank you so much for this incredible honor," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the ballroom sound system. "When I started my career, I never imagined I'd be standing here today, recognized for innovations that began as simple ideas in my home office." Simple ideas in his home office. The home office that was our kitchen table, where I'd written every line of code he was being celebrated for creating. "I have to thank my team at Halstrom Technologies," he continued, "especially my partner Sienna Lowe, who's been instrumental in bringing these visions to life." Partner. He called her his partner. In front of 300 industry leaders, in front of cameras that would broadcast this speech to industry publications, he called the woman he was cheating with his partner. While I sat in the back of the room, the actual architect of every innovation he was being honored for, invisible and uncredited and completely erased from the story of my own work. That's when I pulled out my phone and sent the email that would change everything. To Halstrom Technologies Board of Directors. CC. Industry Today Editorial Board, Tech Innovation Magazine, Corporate Ethics Quarterly. Subject: Proof of Intellectual Theft, read before applause. The body of the email contained a single link to Project Halo, the private drive where I documented 3 years of systematic theft. Every algorithm Noah had claimed. Every presentation he'd stolen. Every innovation he'd built his career on while erasing the woman who'd actually created them. Timeline analyses proving that my open-source work predated his presentations by months in every case. Code signature comparisons showing identical patterns between my documented work and his claimed innovations. Financial records showing how Halstrom had profited from stolen intellectual property while I received no compensation or credit. And at the bottom, a simple note: the real architect of these algorithms is in the room tonight. She's been watching from the back, invisible as always, while you celebrate a man who built his career on theft. Her name is Lily Carter, and she has documentation to prove every word of this email. I watched the phones light up across the ballroom. One by one, starting with the board members' table, then spreading outward like ripples in a pond. The soft glow of screens illuminating faces that went from confusion to shock to anger as they read through the evidence I'd compiled. Noah was still speaking, still basking in applause he didn't deserve, completely unaware that his career was imploding in real time. He was talking about the future of innovation, about the importance of visionary leadership, about the algorithms that would shape the next generation of automated systems. My algorithms. Every single one of them mine. The murmurs started quietly. Whispered conversations at tables as people shared their phones, showed each other the documentation, began to understand the magnitude of what they were witnessing. A fraud being celebrated. A theft being applauded. A criminal being honored while his victim sat invisible in the back of the room. Noah's boss, the CEO of Halstrom Technologies, was staring at his phone with an expression of growing horror. He looked up from the screen, scanning the crowd until his eyes found me in the back of the room. Our gazes met across the ballroom, and I saw recognition in his face. Not just of who I was, but of what Noah had done. The CEO stood slowly, his movement causing heads to turn, conversations to pause, attention to shift away from Noah's speech and toward the drama unfolding in the audience. Mr. Carter, the CEO's voice cut through Noah's continuing speech, amplified by his own microphone at the head table. I need to ask you a direct question. Noah stopped mid-sentence, confused by the interruption, but still confident in his position. Still believing that his theft was secret, that his lies were safe, that his reputation was secure. Of course, sir. What can I help clarify? Did you write the algorithmic code that forms the basis of your award tonight? The question hung in the air like a sword waiting to fall. Noah's confidence flickered for just a moment, a micro-expression of panic before he regained his composure and smiled. Of course I did. Every line. It's been my passion project for the past 3 years. And the woman in the back of the room, your wife, I believe, what was her contribution to this work? Noah finally looked toward where I sat, seeing me for the first time since I'd entered the ballroom. His face went through a series of expressions: surprise, confusion, calculation, and finally, fear. He was beginning to understand that something had gone terribly wrong with his perfect plan. Lily? He tried to sound casual, loving, like a husband surprised to see his supportive wife at his moment of triumph. Honey, I didn't know you were coming tonight. I thought you said you weren't feeling well. I stood up slowly, every eye in the room turning to focus on me. The invisible woman stepping into the light. The ghost engineer becoming visible. The real architect of every innovation being celebrated on that stage. I never said I wasn't feeling well, Noah, I said, my voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. I said I wasn't invited. You told me this was a closed event, that spouses weren't welcome, that it would be all technical talk I wouldn't understand. The lie was exposed in real time, in front of 300 witnesses. He deliberately excluded me from his moment of triumph because he knew I was the real source of everything he was being celebrated for. I did write every line of that code, I continued, walking slowly toward the front of the room. Every algorithm you're being honored for tonight. Every innovation you've built your career on. Every breakthrough you've presented as your own inspiration came from my work, developed at our kitchen table while you were at the office taking credit for solutions I'd created. The silence was absolute. You could hear the air conditioning cycling, the distant sound of traffic outside, the collective held breath of 300 people witnessing a public reckoning unlike anything they'd ever seen. That's not true, Noah stammered, but his voice lacked conviction. He was looking at the faces in the audience, seeing skepticism and disgust and the beginning of understanding. Lily helps me sometimes, but the real innovations are documented in a private drive I've been maintaining for 3 years, I interrupted. Time-stamped code commits, revision histories, voice memos explaining my thought processes. Everything needed to prove that you've built your entire career on intellectual theft. The CEO was still standing, still holding his phone, still staring at the evidence I'd provided. Mr. Carter, I'm looking at side-by-side code comparisons right now. The documentation suggests that your wife's work predates your presentations by months in every case. She's my wife, Noah said desperately. We collaborate. We work together. Her ideas become my innovations. That's how marriage works. No, I said, and my voice was steady now, strong, filled with 3 years of suppressed rage and pain and humiliation. That's how theft works. Marriage is partnership. What you've done is plagiarism. You've stolen my work, claimed my innovations, erased my contributions, and built your career on lies while systematically excluding me from any recognition or credit. I was at the front of the room now, standing next to the stage where Noah held his stolen award, facing the audience that had applauded his fraudulent achievements. "My name is Lily Carter," I said, addressing the room as I should have been introduced hours ago. "I have a master's degree in computer science from MIT. I've been developing algorithmic solutions for automated systems for over a decade. And every innovation that Noah Carter has been recognized for tonight was created by me, stolen by him, and presented as his original work while I was kept invisible and uncredited." The murmurs were getting louder now. People were sharing information, pulling up documentation on their phones, beginning to understand the scope of what they were witnessing. This wasn't just a marital dispute, this was corporate fraud on a massive scale. Security appeared at the edges of the ballroom. Not for me, for Noah. The CEO had made a phone call while I was speaking, and now men in dark suits were moving toward the stage where my husband stood holding an award he'd earned through systematic theft. "Mr. Carter," one of the security guards said quietly, "we need you to come with us." "This is insane," Noah protested, but his voice was breaking now. "She's my wife. She's having some kind of breakdown. You can't believe." "Sir, we need you to come with us now," the guard repeated, and Noah had no choice but to surrender the crystal award and follow them toward the exit. But before he left, he turned back to look at me one last time. The woman who'd spent 3 years making him look brilliant while he made her invisible. The wife who'd sacrificed her professional identity so he could steal her innovations and call them his own. The mother of his son who'd finally decided that love didn't mean enabling theft. "You've destroyed everything," he said, and there was real pain in his voice. Not remorse, pain. The pain of a narcissist whose carefully constructed lies had finally collapsed. "Our marriage, our family, our life together. Was your pride really worth destroying all of that?" I looked at this man I'd loved, this father of my child, this thief who'd stolen 3 years of my professional life and tried to steal the rest. And I felt nothing. No love, no hate, no regret. Just empty relief that the truth was finally visible. "I didn't destroy our marriage, Noah," I said quietly. "You did. The moment you decided that stealing from your wife was acceptable. The moment you chose to build your career on lies instead of your own work. The moment you forgot that partnership means building each other up, not tearing each other down." He left then, escorted by security while 300 industry leaders watched the man they'd been honoring revealed as a fraud. While cameras captured the moment that would become a case study in corporate ethics programs. While the woman he'd tried to erase finally stepped into the light she'd been generating all along. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate his downfall or take pleasure in his humiliation. I simply turned to face the audience, my audience now, and delivered the speech that should have introduced me hours ago. "My name is Lily Carter, and I'm an engineer. For the past 3 years, I've been developing innovations in algorithmic design while being systematically excluded from professional recognition. Tonight, that changes. Tomorrow, I'll be joining Axion Core as their director of algorithmic systems, where my work will carry my name and my contributions will be properly credited." The applause that followed wasn't polite or obligatory. It was genuine, respectful, the kind of recognition I'd been earning but never receiving for 3 years. The audience was applauding not just my innovations, but my courage in fighting for credit, my strength in exposing the truth, my refusal to remain invisible any longer. "I'm also working with industry organizations to develop protocols for preventing intellectual property theft," I continued. "Because what happened to me happens to too many engineers, especially women, who find their work stolen by colleagues, supervisors, or partners who believe that credit belongs to whoever has the most confidence to claim it." The standing ovation that followed felt like vindication. Not just for me, but for every ghost engineer who'd ever seen their work credited to someone else. Every invisible architect whose innovations had been stolen by people with better networking skills and fewer scruples. Every brilliant mind that had been erased by someone who preferred taking credit to earning it. I left the ballroom that night not as Noah Carter's wife, but as Lily Carter, engineer. The woman whose name would finally appear on patents and publications and presentations. The professional who would never again allow her work to be stolen or her contributions to be erased. The headlines started appearing the next morning. Tech executive exposed for intellectual property theft. The woman behind Hallstrom's innovations. Ghost engineer steps into the light. Every major industry publication picked up the story, using it as a case study in corporate fraud and gender discrimination in tech. Noah's fall was swift and complete. Criminal charges for intellectual property theft. Civil lawsuits from Hallstrom for fraudulent representation. Professional blacklisting that would make him unemployable in any reputable tech company. The career he'd built on stolen work crumbled as quickly as it had been constructed. Sienna disappeared even faster. The moment the scandal broke, she deleted her social media accounts, quit her job, and vanished from his life as quickly as she'd entered it. Predators don't stick around when their hosts stop providing resources to steal. But my rise was just beginning. Axion Core didn't just hire me, they showcased me. My name went on everything I created. My innovations were credited properly. My contributions were recognized, celebrated, and compensated fairly. The same algorithms that once chained me now carried my name in every line of code. The work I'd done in secret, the innovations I'd developed without credit, the breakthroughs I'd achieved while being systematically erased, all of it became the foundation for a career that finally belonged to me. Patents filed under my name. Presentations given by me about my work to audiences who knew exactly who had created the solutions they were learning about. Axion Core's profile rose with mine. We became known as the ethical alternative to companies that stole from their employees, the place where innovation was properly attributed and contributors were fairly recognized. We attracted the best engineers. Especially women who'd been burned by companies that treated them as invisible assets instead of valuable professionals. The success felt different when it was honestly earned. When your name was on the work you'd created. When the recognition matched the contribution. When partnership meant building each other up instead of one person stealing from another. But the real victory came at home with Eli. 6 months after the scandal broke, he showed me his latest robotics project, a miniature drone with navigation capabilities he'd programmed himself. The project board had a small nameplate at the bottom, built by Eli Carter. "You signed your name," I said softly, running my finger over the careful lettering. "You told me never to forget it," he replied, his young face serious. "You said that taking credit for someone else's work makes you a thief, but not signing your name on your own work makes you invisible." He'd been watching, learning, understanding the difference between honest achievement and stolen recognition, absorbing lessons about integrity and credit and the importance of standing up for your own work. "Then I've already won," I whispered, pulling him into a hug. Because that was the real victory. Not exposing Noah's theft or building my own successful career or even getting justice for 3 years of erasure. The real victory was teaching my son that your work belongs to you, that credit should match contribution, that love doesn't mean letting people steal your dreams. The real victory was making sure that Eli would grow up to be the kind of man who builds his success on his own work, who gives credit where it's due, who sees partnership as lifting each other up instead of tearing each other down. 1 year later, Axion Core held its first annual Innovation Awards banquet. At the same Chamberlain Pavilion where Noah had been exposed as a fraud, where my invisibility had finally ended, where the truth had set me free. But this time, my name was on the invitation header, hosted by Chief Engineer Lily Carter and the Axion Core Innovation Team. I scanned the guest list carefully, adding names of engineers I knew had been overlooked, contributors who'd been erased, innovators who deserved recognition. Including Grace, The former Hellstrom receptionist who'd once apologized for excluding me from company events I should have been invited to. No one gets left outside my doors again. The banquet was everything I'd imagined professional recognition could be. Engineers of all backgrounds sharing their innovations openly. Credits given properly. Contributions acknowledged honestly. A celebration of actual achievement instead of stolen recognition. During my opening remarks, I looked out at an audience that included some of the same people who'd witnessed Noah's exposure the year before. People who'd seen what happened when theft was revealed, when lies collapsed, when the invisible finally became visible. Innovation belongs to the innovator, I said, addressing the room with confidence I'd spent years building. Credit belongs to the contributor. Recognition belongs to the achiever. And when we ensure that those principles are protected, we create an industry where the best ideas rise to the surface regardless of who has the loudest voice or the best networking skills. The applause was genuine, respectful, earned. Not for my connections or my husband's reputation or my ability to remain invisible while others took credit. For my work, my innovations. My contributions to a field that finally recognized me as the engineer I'd always been. After the ceremony, David Kim approached me with a knowing smile. Any regrets about leaving the shadows? I thought about Noah, wherever he was now, probably still blaming me for his downfall instead of accepting responsibility for his theft. I thought about the 3 years I'd spent invisible, erased, ghost engineering innovations that built someone else's career. He thought humiliation would define me, I said quietly. But it only drafted my blueprint. Now every system that bears my code whispers the same truth. Lily built this. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. If this story of justice made you believe in quiet strength, hit that like button right now. Comment your favorite moment of revenge and subscribe for more true-to-life power stories. Because sometimes the greatest victory isn't destroying your enemies. It's building something so brilliant that their theft becomes irrelevant compared to your honest achievement. Sometimes the best revenge is success that can't be stolen, recognition that can't be erased, and a legacy that belongs entirely to you.